Have you ever felt like everything you do is to please others, for the acceptance of others? We've all heard the saying, people spend money they don't have to please people they don't even like. Have you ever felt like you should have said something, but you held back because people around you? You want to start this business, you want to start a YouTube channel, you want to go apply for that big job, apply for that high position, but you held back because you were afraid of what others might think. Maybe you're afraid that people will belittle you, or people will shame you, that your friends will just say, oh, who does this guy think he is? As Jesus said, no prophet is accepted in his hometown. So you end up living a complacent life. You live in safety and at ease, not living for God, not speaking out when you need to, not being ambitious. You don't seek the purpose of God in your life. And you may possibly be missing out on the purpose and the plan he has on your life because you're seeking to please others. And this happens, guys. And I'm no short of what I'm going to say here. I've also fell into this, guys. Don't get it twisted. But this happens because we're seeking the praise of man rather than the praise of God. So let me tell you guys something. We need to not live for the praise of others, but we need to live for the audience of one. Now, guys, I'm going to jump straight into John 12. And we see a very interesting passage here. And this is during the time of Jesus' ministry on earth. And there's belief and unbelief among the Jews. The Pharisees, who were the religious leaders at the time and whom Jesus was condemning the most because they were hypocrites. And they were actually leading people astray in the name of religiousness. They used it as camouflage. But there were really there were wolves in sheep's clothing. So Jesus is exposing them and showing them the true way of life. He did many signs and wonders and miracles. But we see this, and it's in verse 37, chapter 12 of the Gospel of John. Even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, they still would not believe in him. They're talking about the Pharisees, the religious leaders, who were filled with pride. This was to fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet. Lord, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For this reason they could not believe, because as Isaiah says elsewhere, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so they can neither see with their eyes or hear with their ears, nor turn, and I would heal them. So this is a prophecy about them being stubborn, even in the midst of seeing signs and wonders. Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. Now pay attention here. This is really interesting. Yet at the same time, many even among the leaders believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they would not openly acknowledge their faith for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved the human praise more than the praise of God. Guys, we see here that there were many leaders who understood the scriptures. They understood the prophecy. They understood that he was the Messiah. He was accomplishing the will of God. And if they believed, they would have everlasting life. They could become part of his kingdom, of being his disciple that would last for eternity. And we see in the Acts that they did great works. But because they loved the praise of religious leaders, their high positions, flowing around with robes and seating in, king's chairs and looking all holy and and perfect, they passed up on that. Why? It says here, they loved human praise more than the praise of God. Guys, how many times have we passed up on an opportunity to glorify God, to step in his calling? It may be a little bit scary. Maybe people might start hating on you because that's what they did to Jesus. But if you love the praise of God more than the praise of man, you'll see that the Lord will exalt you. It says, humble yourselves before the hand of God, and he will lift you up in due time. So guys, have this in mind. We're going to look at an example of a mighty man of God, a powerful story. And it's in the book of Daniel about 3 men who defied a king. And even when the whole world at the time was worshiping an image. So let's jump into the story. And in this time, Israel is under the reign of the Babylonians. They're in exile because they disobeyed God. But there were still righteous men there. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were 3 righteous men who were friends of Daniel the prophet. And if you don't know what all that means, don't even worry about it. But we're going to jump into the story. At the time, there was this king called King Nebuchadnezzar. And during the time, he was the ruler of all the known world. I mean, even God himself said he made him a tree that the whole world could see, that all the animals of the world took shelter under. So he was like the king of the world, the ruler of the greatest ruler the world had seen yet. So let's read what it says. Daniel chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come up to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. So King Nebuchadnezzar had just made a huge image of gold that everyone has to worship. So the herald loudly proclaimed, nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. So guys, we see that King Nebuchadnezzar made a rule that everyone had to fall down and worship before the blazing furnace, or before the image of gold, or else they would be thrown into the blazing furnace. So we continue on in verse 7. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So guys, we see that literally the whole world was falling down and worshiping this gold image. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And that whoever does not fall down and worships will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." So we have these accusers coming against these 3 righteous men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, saying, look, they're not worshiping like the rest of the world is. You need to do something about this. So furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned these 3 men. So King Nebuchadnezzar said, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. then what God will be able to save you from my hand?" So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." What a powerful bit of scripture right there, guys. He said they had faith that God would save them. But even if he did not, they were still going to be faithful to the point of death. We need some more men like this, guys. Continuing in verse 19, "Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times harder than usual, commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up them and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing the robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up these 3 men, and they were firmly tied, and they fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, 'Weren't there 3 men that were tied up and threw into the fire?' They replied, 'Certainly, your majesty.' He said, 'Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods.' Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, 'Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here.' So these 3 men came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, 'Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way.' Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon." Guys, we see because of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these 3 righteous men's faith in God, standing firm in truth, living for the audience of one, rather, even though that all the nations and the peoples of that world, of this world in that time, were falling down and worshiping before that image, they stood firm to the point of death. They had faith in God, but they even had faith to the point of, even if he didn't, they were still going to be faithful, guys. So we need more people to live for the audience of one. When the apostles were speaking against the Sanhedrin, the religious leaders preaching the gospel against one of the most powerful things in the world at that time, the Sanhedrin in the Roman Empire, they said, "Who should we please?" They commanded them, "Stop preaching in the name of Jesus, or we'll kill you." They said, "Who should we please? Should we please man or God? You be the judges. As for us, we cannot help but proclaim what we have seen and heard." Guys, many of us have gone most of our lives people-pleasing, guys. We're afraid of taking a step forward. We're afraid of saying something bold that might offend people. Maybe you have a girlfriend that you don't want to say anything too bold or she might get uncomfortable. Maybe your friends and your family. Guys, a lot of times they can hold you back. We love them, we care about them, but at the end of the day, Jesus said, "If anyone who loves their father, mother, brother, sister, wife, and children, yes, even their own life more than me, cannot be my disciple," guys. When we're trying to please God, at the end of the day, guys, it sets you free. King David in the Psalm said, "Though my mother and my father forsake me, the Lord will receive me." Guys, when you are living for God alone, the audience of one, thousands upon thousands can come against you and it won't matter. You could talk in front of thousands of people and you won't even be afraid, guys, because you know you have the acceptance of one. In Romans 8:31, it says, If God is for us, who can be against us? King David in the Psalm said, though an army encamp around me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. Guys, we have to be living not for the praise of man, but we need to live for the audience of one. Guys, I hope this was of great encouragement to you guys. I'm going to continue to crank out as many videos as I can before school starts. But nevertheless, guys, I believe in you guys. I love you all. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.